Every Tuesday at exactly 2 o'clock, my phone rang, and it was always my neighbor telling me to check my SE. The first time it happened, I thought it was a mistake. I was in my kitchen making a sandwich, the kind my doctor says I shouldn't eat anymore, when the phone lit up with her name. We'd lived next to each other for 6 years and barely spoke beyond nods and weather. When I answered, she didn't say hello. She said, "You need to look at your cameras. Right now." Then she hung up. I checked the monitor in my den. The driveway was empty. The street was quiet. No cars, no people, no movement except a flag down the block stirring in the wind. I waited a minute, then another. Nothing happened. I told myself she'd confused my house with someone else's, and I went back to my sandwich. The next Tuesday, at 2 o'clock on the dot, the phone rang again. Same voice. Same words. "Check your cameras." Click. This time I sat down in front of the screen and watched longer. Still nothing. No packages stolen. No strangers. No kids cutting across the lawn. Just my own house sitting there like it always had. By the third week, I felt irritated. I was 74 years old, retired, and careful with my routines. I didn't enjoy being startled for no reason. When she called again, I let it ring once before answering. She sounded tense, like she was whispering through clenched teeth. "Did you see it?" she asked. I told her there was nothing to see. She paused, then said, "There will be," and hung up. That was the first time I felt uneasy. I started keeping the monitor on, even when I wasn't watching it. Tuesday afternoons, I stopped going out. I sat in my chair and waited. At 2 o'clock, right on schedule, something small finally happened. A shadow crossed the edge of my driveway. Just for a second. When I rewound the footage, I couldn't tell what it was. Maybe a person. Maybe nothing at all. But my neighbor called anyway, as if she'd seen it herself. That was when I realized she wasn't guessing. She was timing it. After that, I started paying closer attention to my neighbor. Her name was Linda. Late 50s, maybe early 60s. Divorced, no kids that I ever saw. She kept her lawn trimmed too short and her curtains closed all day. We waved less after the calls started. When I tried to ask her what she meant, she'd smile thinly and say, "Just keep watching on Tuesdays," like it was a joke we were sharing. The fourth Tuesday, I decided to write things down. Time of call. What I saw. What I didn't see. At 2 p.m. sharp, the phone rang. At 2:01, a man walked past my driveway on the sidewalk. Baseball cap pulled low. Didn't stop. Didn't look at the house. Just kept going. If I hadn't been waiting, I wouldn't have noticed him at all. Linda called again at 2:03. "You saw him," she said. Not a question. I asked her who he was. She didn't answer. She just said, "That's why I call," and hung up. I told myself it was coincidence. People walk down our street all the time. But the next week, it happened again. Different person. Same timing. Always brief. Always ordinary. A woman slowing near the mailbox. A pickup truck idling half a block away. A man standing across the street pretending to check his phone. Nothing illegal. Nothing obvious. Just enough to make you feel watched if you were already looking. I adjusted the camera angles after that. Paid for extra cloud storage. Sat closer to the screen. My afternoon started to feel smaller, boxed in by that 2 o'clock hour. I stopped taking naps. I stopped going out for groceries on Tuesdays. One afternoon, I saw Linda standing on her porch at 1:58, staring straight at my house. She didn't wave. She didn't move. At exactly 2, my phone rang. I answered without taking my eyes off the monitor. "Do you see it now?" she asked. I told her yes. I asked her why this mattered. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Because they think you're not paying attention," and hung up. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about the word they. The following Tuesday, I didn't wait for the call. At 1:55, I was already in the den, curtains open, monitor live, notebook on my lap. My house felt different when I was waiting like that. Too quiet. Every sound stood out. The refrigerator cycling. A car door somewhere far off. At exactly 2, the phone rang anyway. This time, I didn't answer. I watched the screen instead. At 2:02, a sedan rolled slowly past my house, driver staring straight ahead, passenger looking down. It didn't stop. At 2:04, the same car came back the other way. When I zoomed in, the license plate was partially obscured by glare. That didn't sit right with me. The phone rang again at 2:05. I picked up. "You missed part of it," Linda said. Her voice was sharp now, annoyed. They doubled back. I asked her how she knew that. She exhaled, long and controlled. "Because I've been watching longer than you," she said. "And because it's not really about your house." That was the first real crack. I asked her what she meant. She didn't answer directly. She said, "Did you ever read the notice from the city last year? About easements and property access?" I remembered it. Some vague letter about infrastructure reviews. I'd tossed it in a drawer and forgotten about it. Linda told me to pull it out. After we hung up, I did. The letter was dry, full of language that looked harmless if you skimmed it. Possible future access. Surveying rights. Temporary use. I felt foolish for ignoring it. I also felt a knot forming in my stomach. The next week, the man with the baseball cap showed up again. Same time. Same slow walk. This time, he stopped at the edge of my driveway and looked directly at the camera. Not long. Just enough. When Linda called, she didn't say anything at first. She let the silence stretch. "They're documenting," she said finally. "Patterns. Habits. Who notices and who doesn't?" I asked her why she cared so much. There was a pause. Then she said, "Because the last neighbor who didn't pay attention sold cheap and left," and hung up. That was when I understood this wasn't about curiosity anymore. It was about pressure. The pressure didn't come all at once. It never does. The next Tuesday, a city truck parked down the block just before 2. No logos I recognized. 2 men stood near it pretending to check a clipboard. One of them took photos. Not of my house exactly, but close enough that it felt intentional. Linda called right on time and said, "That's new," like she was taking inventory. I finally went over to her house that evening. Knocked twice. She answered with the chain still on. Her eyes flicked past me to the street before she opened it fully. Inside, her living room was stripped down, almost bare. No pictures. No decorations. Just a couch, a chair, and a folding table covered in papers. She told me she used to work for a firm that handled community transitions. That was her phrase. She didn't say development, but that's what she meant. Buyouts. Rezoning. The slow kind of push that didn't look like force until it was too late. She said Tuesdays at 2 were when the consultants did their field checks. Always had. It was quiet. Predictable. People were home but distracted. I asked her why she didn't just say all this in the beginning. She looked tired when she answered. "Because no one listens until they see it themselves," she said. "And because if I warned you outright, they'd say I was harassing you." The following week, I got a letter. Not a threat. Just an offer. Fair market value, They called it quick close. Minimal disruption. I didn't respond. At 2 o'clock that Tuesday, a woman stood across the street and wrote something down while looking at her watch. Linda didn't call that day. I watched anyway. The next morning, my trash bin had been moved a foot closer to the curb. Small thing. But I hadn't done it. Neither had the wind. That was when it hit me how narrow my choices were becoming. Sell quietly. Fight loudly. Or wait and let the street change around me until I was the problem holding things up. I called Linda that afternoon. She answered on the first ring. I asked her what happened to the neighbor who sold cheap and left. She said he moved in with his daughter 2 states away and died a year later. Not dramatic. Just smaller. They didn't break the law, she said. They just outlasted him. The next Tuesday, at 2 o'clock, the phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Linda. The voice on the line was calm and professional. A man. He said his name, a company I didn't recognize, and then said, "We've noticed you have exterior security cameras. We'd appreciate it if you didn't interfere with scheduled site observations." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten me. He spoke like someone reminding you of a policy you were already expected to follow. I asked him how he got my number. He said it was public record and ended the call. At 2 o'clock exactly, a man stood at the edge of my lawn and held up a tablet. He wasn't hiding it. He wanted it seen. Linda called at 2:01. "That's the escalation," she said. "No greeting. No apology. They don't like variables." I told her they'd called me directly. There was a pause on the line, then a quiet, "I was afraid of that." She said once they made contact, the clock usually sped up. More letters. More visits. More reasons to feel tired. The next letter came Friday. Revised offer. Slightly better numbers. A friendly tone. Still no deadline, but the implication was there. The following Tuesday, a different car parked in front of my house. The driver stayed inside, engine running. At 2:10, he drove off. I started noticing other changes. Survey flags appeared along the block, not on my property, but close enough to feel intentional. A city notice was taped to a neighbor's mailbox and left mine untouched. It felt like being isolated without being excluded. Linda stopped answering her phone after that week. When I went over, her house was dark. No car. No note. Just an empty porch and a "for sale" sign that hadn't been there before. I stood there longer than I meant to, feeling foolish for thinking we were in this together. That Tuesday, no one called at 2. Still, I watched the cameras. At 2:07, a woman walked up my driveway and took a photo of my front door. She didn't knock. She didn't linger. She left a business card tucked under my mat and walked away. When I picked it up later, my hands shook more than I liked. It was the same company. I realized then that Linda hadn't been warning me out of kindness alone. She'd been buying herself time. And now she was gone. The next decision was mine alone, and every option carried a cost. I didn't sell right away. That was my first mistake. I told myself I needed time to think, but what I really wanted was for things to slow down. They didn't. The following Tuesday, at 2 o'clock, a city inspector knocked on my door. He was polite. He said someone had reported a possible code issue with my front steps. He took photos, made notes, and said I'd hear back. I never did, but the message landed anyway. The week after that, a letter arrived saying my fence encroached slightly past the property line. The measurement was questionable, but fighting it would require a survey and a lawyer. I knew that. They knew that. At 2 o'clock that same day, a man stood across the street and watched me read the letter through my front window. I started feeling older than I was. Sleep came in pieces. I stopped answering unknown numbers. Every knock made my chest tighten. I caught myself checking the cameras on days that weren't Tuesday, just to be sure nothing had shifted when I wasn't looking. One afternoon, I drove past Linda's house. The sign was gone. The place already looked different. Fresh paint. New trim. It felt like proof of what happened if you didn't hold your ground, or maybe what happened if you did and got tired first. I couldn't tell which was worse. At 2 o'clock the next Tuesday, the phone rang again. It was the same man from before. He said, "We'd prefer to resolve this amicably," and suggested I reconsider the offer. He reminded me that prolonged disputes were stressful, especially at my age. He said it like concern. I heard it like a warning. That afternoon, my daughter called. She lives 3 states away. She'd heard from a cousin that I was having issues. I told her it was nothing. She didn't believe me. She said I could come stay with them for a while if I needed. I thanked her and changed the subject. That night, I sat alone in my living room and realized how quiet the house had become. Not peaceful. Just empty. The kind of quiet that makes you aware of every compromise you're considering. The following Tuesday, I didn't watch the cameras. I sat at the kitchen table instead and waited for the call. When it came, I answered and told the man I'd accept the offer, with conditions. He agreed too quickly. That should have bothered me more than it did. After I hung up, I looked around my house and understood that paying attention had only bought me a different kind of ending. One that didn't feel like winning, just choosing which loss I could live with. The paperwork moved faster than I expected. Within a week, there were emails, overnight envelopes, and a woman who introduced herself as a relocation coordinator. She spoke gently, like someone trained to keep voices calm. She asked about my timeline, my health needs, whether I required assistance packing. I told her I could manage. I wasn't ready to admit how much managing already hurt. Tuesday came again. 2 o'clock passed without a call. I still glanced at the clock when it happened. Habit had set in. The cameras showed nothing unusual. That somehow felt worse, like the attention had already shifted away from me. I started sorting through my things. Not everything. Just enough to feel the weight of what I'd accumulated. Old tax files. My wife's sweaters, still folded the way she'd left them. Tools I hadn't used in years but kept because they meant I could, if I needed to. Each box I filled felt like a quiet concession. The coordinator stopped by one afternoon to take photos for her records. She didn't linger. She didn't look me in the eye much. When she left, she reminded me the offer was contingent on a clean exit. No delays. No disputes. Everyone does better when this goes smoothly, she said. I nodded. What else was there to say? That night, I checked the cameras one last time and powered the system down. I told myself it was because I didn't need them anymore. The truth was I didn't want to see who replaced me. On the final Tuesday before closing, my phone rang at 2 o'clock. Unknown number. I answered out of reflex. It was Linda. Her voice sounded thinner, like she was calling from somewhere temporary. She asked if I'd sold. I said yes. She didn't apologize. She didn't congratulate me. She just said, "Then it's over for you," and hung up. I sat there a long time after that, staring at the silent screen. Moving out didn't feel dramatic. No confrontation. No last stand. Just boxes, signatures, and a quiet drive away. When I handed over the keys, the man who took them thanked me for my cooperation. He meant it. As I pulled onto the highway, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief. Just distance. Paying attention hadn't saved my house. It had only taught me how carefully pressure can be applied, and how alone you can be even when someone is trying to help. By the time the exit sign disappeared behind me, I understood that seeing the truth doesn't always give you the power to change it. Sometimes, it just lets you leave with your eyes open. I moved into a smaller place near my daughter, a quiet apartment with thin walls and a parking lot that stayed lit all night. It was safe enough. Predictable. Nobody watched it at 2 o'clock on Tuesdays. For a while, I kept track of time anyway. Old habits don't disappear just because the reason for them does. Tuesdays would roll around and I'd feel that familiar tightening in my chest just before 2, like my body remembered something my mind was trying to forget. The phone never rang. A month after the sale closed, a notice came in the mail. Not for me. It was addressed to my old house, forwarded by mistake. Public hearing. Rezoning approval. The kind of language that looks clean and orderly on paper. I didn't read it twice. I didn't need to. I drove past the old neighborhood once, early on, telling myself I was just curious. The house was already wrapped in temporary fencing. A sign out front showed a rendering of something modern and flat, nothing like the place my wife and I had chosen because of the big tree out back. The tree was gone. Cut clean at the base. I didn't stop the car. Linda never called again. I don't know where she landed. I think about her sometimes, how precise she was about the timing, how she understood the rhythm of it all. She hadn't been paranoid. She'd been experienced. Every so often, someone asks if I regret not fighting harder. Hiring a lawyer. Going to the press. Making noise. I tell them the truth. I was tired before it started. Age doesn't just slow your body. It narrows your tolerance for drawn-out battles where the rules aren't written down. What stays with me isn't the loss of the house. It's the realization that paying attention didn't protect me. It just made me aware of how carefully everything was arranged to look reasonable while pushing me out. I still believe there's value in noticing things. In watching. But I also know now that awareness has limits. It doesn't always lead to control. Sometimes it only gives you the chance to decide how you'll leave. On Tuesdays at 2, I make a cup of coffee and sit by the window. Not because I expect anything to happen, but because I remember what it felt like when it did. And because I don't want to forget how quiet pressure sounds when you're the only one listening. The place where my house used to be opened last spring. I didn't go to the ceremony. I saw a photo online instead, sent by a former neighbor who'd stayed longer than I did. Clean lines. New name. Smiling people holding paper cups of coffee. The caption talked about revitalization and opportunity. No mention of what stood there before. I saved the photo for a day, then deleted it. Life settled into something smaller after that. I walk more. I sleep lighter. I don't own much now, and what I do own fits without effort. My daughter worries I've grown too quiet. I tell her I'm just listening differently. Every once in a while, I think about Linda and those Tuesday calls. About how she never asked me to fight, only to notice. I understand now that she wasn't trying to stop what was coming. She was trying to make sure someone else saw it too, if only briefly. The cost of that awareness wasn't heroism or victory. It was clarity. And clarity doesn't always come with comfort. I lost a house. I lost a neighborhood. I lost the illusion that fairness shows up just because you're reasonable and patient. What I gained was harder to explain. A clean understanding of how power moves quietly, politely, on schedules most people don't bother to watch. At my age, you don't get many chances to learn something new without paying for it. This one cost me more than I wanted to give, but it taught me where my limits are, and where they always were. On Tuesdays at 2, I still pause sometimes. Just for a moment. Then I let the time pass. Nothing calls anymore. And that, in its own way, is the ending I was given.